Hi, I'm Izzy, and this is Dizzy Quilts and Sews. In today's video, I have a pattern review of the Tobin sweater by Cashmerette. I made the Tobin sweater this month as a piece of my winter capsule. I talked about this in my January plans last week. I'm working on a whole capsule for the winter inspired by the Everyday Style capsule guide that Jennifer puts out every season. So I needed a couple of sweaters, and the Tobin was the first one of the sweaters I was making for myself. Now it's really cold in Montreal. It's January. Not that it's been crazy cold, but a nice snuggly sweater is definitely going to come in handy this month and well into February and March, I'm sure. I do work from home most of the time. I go into the office once a week, but even when I work from home, I want to be comfortable, I want to be warm, but I also want to look professional and put together, and I thought the Tobin would fit the bill perfectly. Now, before I talk about the pattern, I want to talk about the fabric I used. And I talked about this again in my plans video last week. I needed either a blue or a green sweater to go into my capsule. And when I talked about this during Vlogmas, most of you said, go for green, go for green. So this is a very nice cotton, 100% cotton sweater knit from Minerva. Now, in my plans video, I said that they had described this color as dark forest green, which I thought was a little crazy because it's not dark forest green. Well, I went back on their website and it actually says soft forest green. Now, in my mind, this is not forest green at all, dark or soft, but it's a very nice green. I would say it's probably more like a dark sage green or a strong sage green, something like that. Now, this is incredibly soft, very nice fabric, very nice quality, a pleasure to work with. And I'm going to link to the fabric down below in the description box, but also very pricey. When you factor in the exchange from Canadian dollars to pounds or pounds to Canadian dollars, and then the shipping, this is probably over $80 for a sweater. Now, would I pay $80 for a quality made, quality fabric sweater? I might. I probably would. But the people who say that sewing your own clothes is cheaper, not sure about that. All right, so let's get into the pattern. So Cashmerette describes this pattern as a modern sweater designed for curves with bodice darts and innovative cup sizes. View A, which is the view I made, has a split neck, color blocking, and wide cuffs. View B has a cowl neck and a swingy high-low type hem. And view C is just your straightforward sweatshirt, which also has the seam lines for possible color blocking. So like I said, I made view A, which is the view that's supposed to be color blocked. I mean, it has the seam lines for it. I decided to keep the seam lines because to me, it adds a little bit of interest, a little detail. But I did use the whole, like the same fabric throughout. I used 1-inch buttons, as you can see. They are a gray color, but I love how they almost look green against the green fabric, which is kind of cool. Now, these were in my stash a while ago. I bought like a big box of buttons from Amazon, I think. But I only had 6 of them, and you're supposed to put 3 at the collar and then 2 on each cuff. So I only had enough to put 2, which I think is fine. I think it looks okay. I wish I had had 3 though, just to put another one up here, but no big deal. I wasn't going to go out and buy more buttons just for that one extra button. Now, instructions and construction of this pattern. Cashmerette rates this pattern as a beginner level pattern, and I would 100% agree. The drafting is so good. Everything matches perfectly. Everything is marked. You have the seam allowances right there on the pattern pieces and inside the pattern booklet. Not a difficult sew at all if you've sewn with knits before. Not that knits are all that difficult, let's be honest. There are absolutely no tricky parts to this pattern, not even the collar. The collar, the way it's made, the way it's constructed with the instructions, a beginner can definitely make this pattern. What I love about Cashmerette patterns, and this is across all of their patterns, their instructions make it incredibly clear to know what seam allowance you're supposed to use, what pattern pieces to cut for which view, and then what steps in the pattern apply to which view. So you're never really confused, you're never scratching your head, you can just plod along and sew your garment. Now, in terms of fabric recommendations and requirements, Cashmerette recommends that you use a mid to heavyweight knit fabric with at least 20% stretch horizontally. So we're talking Ponte, we're talking French terries, sweater knits, but nothing too lightweight. So they definitely recommend medium to heavyweight fabric. A boiled wool, I can't remember where I saw it, but I saw recently a boiled wool sweater and I thought it looked amazing. Now, the pattern says that you need anywhere between 2 1/4 yards for this, all the way up to almost 4 yards, depending on the size you make and the view you decide to go with. Now, I had 2.5 meters of this sweater knit, and I probably needed only 2 yards, maybe a touch above 2 yards. And the pattern said that in my size, for the view I was making, I would have needed 3 yards. So that's another thing that I see consistently with Cashmerette patterns. They overestimate the fabric you need. And I'm not sure if it's, they take into account if you have prints that you need to match or if you have directional prints, and they build all of that into their fabric requirements. But that's definitely something I've noticed myself, and I've heard other people say about Cashmerette patterns. Their fabric requirements are just overestimated across the board. So if you're making view B or view A all in one fabric, you probably only need around 2 to 2 1/4 yard fabric in a size 18-20, which is the size that I made. The sizing and the fit, while we talk about size. So this pattern is available from a size 0 to a size 32 with their cup sizes C to H. And this accommodates a bust and hips up to 62 inches, which is amazing. Now, if I looked at the body measurement charts only or use the Cashmerette size calculator on their website, I should have gone for a 16 GH cup at the bust, graded up to a 20 at the waist, and then back down to an 18 at the hips. And that's the size I did the first time I made a knit pattern from Cashmerette, but it was just too snug for me up here. At the shoulder seam was pulled all the way in. I did not like that fit on me at all. So I always make an 18 GH at the bust, graded to 20 at the waist. And then I usually don't bother coming back down to an 18 at the hips. Now, I probably could have done that on this pattern because there's a lot of ease at the hips in this pattern. Lots of extra room. So I could have gone back down, but I was afraid I would end up with a weird bubble right around the waist or high hip. So I typically just go from an 18 at the bust to a 20 waist and hip, and that works perfectly for me. As far as adjustments, just like most cashmere patterns, I didn't have to do a single adjustment. Choosing the 18 GF and grading to a 20 just was the perfect decision. Like in most cashmere patterns, I mean, the fit is really, really good. The shoulder seam is pretty much where it needs to be. And if you've been following me a while, you know that that's one of my biggest pet peeves, when my shoulder seam is not in the right spot. But in this case, they're pretty good. The bust darts are exactly where they needed to be. They point exactly at my apex. The waist shaping is in the right spot. It comes in where it needs to. The only thing I did do is shorten under the waist by 2 inches. And that's typical for me for cashmerette. Cashmerette patterns are drafted for a 5'6" body. I'm 5'4", but my length is usually like between my waist and my shoulders. I have very, very short distance between my waist and my hips. So typically I shorten everything by at least 2 inches. Like in most pattern companies, I shorten everything under the waist by at least a couple of inches. So that's what I did in this case. Now, would I change anything the next time I make this? Because I will make this again. The only little criticism I have about this, and I understand the reasoning behind it, is that the cuffs are a little too big. Like there's a lot of room here. And I get why the cuff pattern piece is this size, because the fabric that they say to get doesn't have a whole lot of stretch. So with 20% stretch, you wouldn't want your cuff to be super snug, because if you're somebody like me who needs to push this up when, you know, I do dishes or whatever, I wouldn't have been able to do that if this cuff had been super snug. So I get that. But if I were to use a fabric with more stretch or with a little bit of spandex in it, I probably would reduce the size of the cuff a little bit, just so it's a little bit tighter around my wrist. But other than that, that's it. And I will make this again. I plan on making the cowl neck version. I plan on making just a simple crew neck sweater. I want to do a color blocked sweater. I have a turtleneck, a ready-to-wear turtleneck that's a plain gray at the top, and then it's a striped cream and gray at the bottom. I really want to recreate that for when that sweater dies, because it's low quality fabric and it's pilling and it's not looking great anymore. So I can definitely use this pattern to recreate that sweater. Now, cashmerette patterns are a bit of an investment. They're $20 or $25. I do get a discount because of the Cashmerette Club that I'm a member of, but still, you know, when you look at other pattern companies and the price point that they're at, you might think, well, 25 or 20 bucks for just a sweater, that's a little steep. So I really and truly believe in using my patterns multiple times. And when you find a fabric company that fits you like Cashmerette fits me, you may be able to mix and match between patterns. So if there was another sweater that uses knit fabrics, I may be able to get the sleeve from that and the bodice from another one and the cowl neck from this one onto another. So you know what I mean. Once you find a block that fits you, stick to it and turn those garments into, or those patterns into TNTs for you. And that's what I do with Cashmerette. So yes, they're a little more expensive, but I end up using them to death to make a lot of things. So I expect that I'll be using the Tobin sweater to make multiple sweaters in the future. So in case you hadn't guessed, I love my sweater. I love this pattern. It was very, very nice to sew. It was a quick sew, and yeah, it just ended up with a sweater that's nice and snuggly and comfortable and warm, but also looks very put together and not just another hoodie or another, you know, crew neck sweater. So I'm very, very, very pleased with my Tobin. Now, I would love to know if you've made the Tobin sweater before, and if you did you like it? Did you have any success with it? And if you've never made it, now that you've heard this review, are you tempted to get it and make it up? Now, I want to bring you more pattern reviews in the future. I personally think they are extremely useful, especially coming from someone who's got zero affiliation with the pattern company. So if you like these, but you'd like me to include different information or more information, please let me know in the comments below. I really want these to be useful. So tell me what you need, and I definitely will try to include that in future pattern reviews. Thank you so much for stopping by today. Please give the video a like on your way out if you liked it, and consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks again, and I will see you soon.